In a Dallas kitchen, an 89-year-old woman was about to face devastating betrayal. What started as birthday planning took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her children's cruelty. Evelyn Mae Rodriguez wasn't your typical grandmother. For decades, she had been a fierce educator and single mother, known for her legendary tamales and sharp wit. When her family callously canceled her 90th birthday, calling her almost dead anyway, she had no idea she was walking into a battle for dignity. Evelyn made a dark vow that would lead to unimaginable consequences. What began as heartbreak would become spite-fueled revenge. Her family would never be the same. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The masa was perfect. Evelyn Mae Rodriguez stood at her kitchen counter, her weathered hands working the corn dough with the same precision she'd used for 67 years. The texture felt right between her fingers, not too wet, not too dry, exactly how her mother had taught her in this very kitchen, when Evelyn was barely tall enough to reach the counter without a step stool. "Mija," she whispered to herself, using her mother's pet name as she shaped another tamale. "You would be so proud. 90 years, and I'm still making them better than anyone in Dallas." The kitchen table groaned under the weight of her preparations. 3 dozen tamales already wrapped and waiting, ingredients for 5 dozen more measured and ready. The guest list lay beside her recipe cards, 150 names carefully written in her still steady handwriting. Teachers from the old school, neighbors from the block, former students, now grandparents themselves, who still sent her Christmas cards. Her 90th birthday party was going to be magnificent. The church hall was booked for Saturday afternoon. Father Miguel had blessed the arrangement personally, joking that she deserved the same treatment as a saint. The flowers, white roses mixed with marigolds, her favorite combination, would arrive Friday morning. She'd even hired a mariachi band, splurging on the good one that played at the Rodriguez family reunions back when the family still gathered for reunions. "Almost there, old girl," she murmured, glancing at the 90 and fabulous banner she'd hung across the kitchen window. "Just 3 more weeks." The doorbell's sharp chime cut through her contented humming. Through the front window, she spotted Marcus's Mercedes parked behind Diana's minivan and Tommy's beat-up Ford truck. Her children arriving together for their planned meeting about party logistics. Her heart lifted. They'd been so secretive about their surprise contributions to the celebration. Diana had hinted at a special slideshow. Marcus mentioned something about, quote, taking care of the important details. Even Tommy, bless his troubled heart, had promised to stay sober for the big day. "Coming," she called, wiping her hands on her apron before hurrying to the front door. At 89, she still moved with purpose, her back straight despite the arthritis that sang its daily song in her joints. Marcus stood on her porch, checking his Rolex, again. Behind him, Diana clutched her purse like a shield, her eyes avoiding Evelyn's gaze. Tommy lurked at the back, hands shoved deep in his pockets, the smell of yesterday's beer still clinging to his rumpled shirt. "Perfect timing," Evelyn beamed, stepping aside to let them in. "I just finished another batch of tamales. You can taste test." "Mom, we need to talk." Marcus's voice carried that clipped tone he used with difficult clients. Kitchen table, family meeting. Something cold settled in Evelyn's chest, but she pushed it away. Surely they were just nervous about their surprise planning. "Of course, Mijo. Would anyone like coffee? I made fresh." "Just sit down, Mom." Diana's voice cracked slightly. She still wouldn't meet Evelyn's eyes. They filed into the kitchen, past the tamale assembly line that suddenly felt like evidence of something embarrassing. Marcus took the chair at the head of the table, the one that used to be his father's. Diana perched on the edge of her seat like she might bolt at any moment. Tommy slumped against the counter, staring at his shoes. "So," Evelyn said, settling into her usual spot, "what did you want to discuss about the party? Because I've been thinking we might need more tables if there isn't going to be a party." The words hit her like a physical blow. Marcus delivered them without looking up from his phone, his finger already swiping to his next text message. "I'm sorry?" The words came out smaller than she intended. "We've decided to cancel the celebration." Marcus finally looked at her, his expression all business. The hall, the band, all of it. We're calling it off. Evelyn's hands found the edge of the table, gripping it to steady herself. I don't understand. Is someone sick? Did something happen with the church? Diana made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a protest. Tommy shifted his weight, the floor creaking under his boots. Nothing happened, Mom. We just think it's… Marcus paused, searching for words that would sound reasonable. Excessive. All that money for one afternoon. It doesn't make practical sense. Practical sense? Evelyn's voice rose. It's my 90th birthday. And you'll still turn 90 with or without a party? Marcus's tone suggested this was obvious logic she should appreciate. Look, we'll take you to dinner somewhere nice. Maybe that place in Bishop Arts you like. Keep it simple. The kitchen felt like it was tilting. Evelyn looked at Diana, searching for support, but her daughter was studying her hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Diana, she whispered, you've been helping me plan this for months. The slideshow, remember? All those photos we went through? Diana's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Mom. I think… maybe Marcus is right. Maybe we got a little carried away. Carried away? The words tasted bitter. This is my 90th birthday. My friends are expecting. Your friends will understand, Marcus interrupted. Hell, most of them probably won't even remember by next week anyway. These things happen. Tommy finally spoke, his words slurred slightly. It's just money down the drain, Ma. For what? So a bunch of old folks can sit around and pretend they're having fun? The cruelty in her son's voice struck her speechless. This was the boy she'd raised alone after his father died. The child she'd tutored through homework every night, driven to Little League practice, held through nightmares. I've already paid deposits, she managed. The flowers, the band. We'll handle the cancellations. Marcus was already pulling out his phone again. Take care of any penalties. Consider it our gift. I don't want your gift. I want my party. The silence that followed stretched like a wire about to snap. Finally, Marcus sighed, the sound of a man dealing with an unreasonable child. Mom, you need to be realistic about your situation. At your age, what about my age? The fire that had carried her through 60 years of teaching difficult teenagers began to kindle in her chest. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his attention already drifting. You know what I mean, it's just practical to… His phone rang. Without apologizing, he answered it. Marcus Rodriguez. Yeah, about the Elmwood property. Evelyn watched her eldest son conduct business in her kitchen while her tamales cooled on the counter and her party plans crumbled around her. Diana sat frozen, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Tommy had found something fascinating about the baseboards to stare at. Marcus cupped the phone, his voice dropping to what he thought was a whisper. Look, I can't talk long. I'm dealing with family stuff. Yeah, my mom's birthday thing. Listen, she's almost dead anyway, you know? No point throwing money at something like this when there are actual priorities. The words hit her like ice water. Almost dead anyway. Her own son. The boy she'd carried for 9 months, nursed through colic, worked 3 jobs to send to college. The man she'd bailed out of 2 failed marriages and a bankruptcy. Standing in her kitchen, dismissing her life as if it were already over, Marcus continued his conversation, oblivious to the devastation spreading across his mother's face. Diana was openly sobbing now, but still hadn't said a word in Evelyn's defense. Tommy had the decency to look ashamed, but not enough to speak up. I need you all to leave. Evelyn's voice was steady, quiet. Marcus held up one finger, still talking into his phone. Diana wiped her eyes, finally looking up. Mom, please, we can talk about this. Now. Evelyn stood, her chair scraping against the linoleum. Get out of my house. Mom, Tommy started. Get out. The roar that erupted from her chest surprised them all. It was the voice that had controlled rowdy classrooms, the authority that had raised 5 children without a husband's help, the strength that had buried parents and friends and kept going. Marcus ended his call, finally giving her his full attention. Mom, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you. Help me? Evelyn's laugh was sharp as broken glass. By humiliating me? By canceling the one thing I've looked forward to for months? By telling strangers I'm almost dead anyway? Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. You weren't supposed to hear that. But I did hear it. And now I want you out. They filed toward the door with the awkward shuffle of people who knew they'd crossed a line but weren't sure how to uncross it. Diana paused at the threshold. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. Maybe we can. Go home to your husband, Diana. Go back to your perfect suburban life, and forget about your almost dead mother. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving Evelyn alone with her tamales and her shattered plans. She stood in her kitchen for a long moment, surrounded by the evidence of her foolish hope. The guest list with its 150 carefully written names. The 90 and fabulous banner hanging cheerfully in the window. The masa on her hands still warm from her palms. Almost dead anyway. Evelyn walked to the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror above the sink. The woman looking back had silver hair that she still styled every week at Rosa's beauty shop. Brown eyes that could still read without glasses. Hands that could still make tamales from scratch. Still type thank you notes on her computer. Still button her own shirts. And tie her own shoes. Her reflection didn't look almost dead. It looked tired, hurt, betrayed, but alive. Very much alive. I'll show them who's almost dead, she whispered to the mirror. The words felt like a promise. Or maybe a threat. She wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. The tamales sat untouched on the counter for 3 days. Evelyn Mae Rodriguez had always been a woman of routine. Morning coffee at 6, evening news at 5:30, Sunday mass without fail. But since her children's betrayal, she'd moved through her house like a ghost haunting her own life. The phone rang 17 times the first day. Rosa calling, checking on her. Then Father Miguel. Then Rosa again. By the 3rd day, the ringing had stopped altogether. She spent those 72 hours in her housecoat, padding between the kitchen and the living room, carrying the weight of almost dead anyway, like a stone in her chest. The guest list remained spread across the kitchen table, 150 names that now looked foolish rather than festive. She'd stared at each one, wondering who else saw her as a burden marking time until the inevitable. Mrs. Chen from down the street, who still brought her soup when she was sick. Dr. Williams, who actually listened during appointments instead of rushing her through. Her former students who sent graduation announcements and wedding invitations. Or were they all just being polite to the old lady who couldn't take a hint? The sound of Rosa's key turning in the front door lock cut through her spiral of self-doubt. Of course, Rosa had a spare key. 47 years of friendship earned certain privileges. Evelyn Rodriguez, I know you're in there. Rosa's voice carried the authority of a woman who'd raised 12 grandchildren and wasn't about to be ignored by her best friend. I've been calling for 3 days, and Senora Martinez saw your newspapers piling up. Evelyn remained curled in her father's old recliner, staring at the muted television where a cooking show played in cheerful silence. She heard Rosa's footsteps moving through the house, checking the kitchen first, then the bedrooms, following the path of their friendship like a map she knew by heart. Ay, Dios mío. Rosa's sharp intake of breath told Evelyn she'd found the tamales, the evidence of interrupted celebration, of hope curdled into waste. Rosa appeared in the living room doorway, her small frame somehow filling the space with indignation. At 71, she was 18 years younger than Evelyn, but moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that bodies were fragile things. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour. Rosa Martinez had never left her house looking anything less than presentable. ¿Qué pasó, mi amor? Rosa's voice softened as she took in Evelyn's appearance. What did those children do to you? The gentle concern in her friend's voice broke something loose in Evelyn's chest. The story spilled out in fragments, the excited planning, the family meeting, Marcus's casual cruelty on the phone. Rosa listened without interruption, her face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and finally, a cold fury that Evelyn had only seen twice in their decades of friendship. Cabrones, Rosa whispered when Evelyn finished. Those ungrateful, selfish. She caught herself, crossing herself quickly. Forgive me, Lord, but sometimes your children test my Christian charity. For the first time in 3 days, Evelyn almost smiled. I don't think God expects you to be charitable about this one, Rosa. Rosa perched on the edge of the couch, studying her friend's face. You look terrible. Thank you. Very helpful. I'm serious. When's the last time you ate, or showered, or even looked in a mirror? Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. What's the point? According to my son, I'm almost dead anyway. Mira, Rosa's voice sharpened, your son is an idiota who wouldn't recognize a blessing if it bit him on his big nalgas. But you? You're not almost anything. You're here, you're breathing, and you're too stubborn to die just because some ungrateful children want to count their inheritance. The words hit something deep in Evelyn's chest. Not the wound Marcus had opened, but something older and stronger. The part of her that had stood up to school boards and difficult parents, that had worked 3 jobs to keep her family fed after her husband died, that had never backed down from a fight worth having. They think I'm a burden, she said quietly. Then prove them wrong. How? Rosa was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice carried a strange note of mischief. Remember when we were young teachers, and Principal Morrison said women our age shouldn't be handling the difficult students? Evelyn nodded. Harold Morrison had been a pompous man who believed 40-year-old women were too fragile for 8th-grade boys with attitude problems. What did we do? We taught those boys so well they sent us thank you cards for 20 years afterward. Exactly. We didn't argue with him, we didn't try to convince him he was wrong. We just proved it. Rosa leaned forward, her dark eyes bright with something that looked like plotting. So prove them wrong about this too. Rosa, I'm 89 years old. What am I supposed to prove? That I can throw my own birthday party? Big deal. No, mi amor. Prove that you're not almost dead. Prove that you're more alive than any of them. The idea settled between them like a challenge. Evelyn felt something stirring in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something sharper. Something that tasted like defiance. What are you suggesting? Rosa's smile was pure mischief. I'm suggesting you outlive them all. The words hung in the air between them, shocking in their simplicity. Evelyn blinked, certain she'd misheard. Outlive them? Why not? Rosa shrugged as if she'd suggested they go shopping. Marcus is what, 55? Stressed? Overweight? Probably has high blood pressure from all that anger he carries around. Diana's 52, and anxious about everything. Tommy's drinking himself to death in your garage. Meanwhile, you're here making tamales from scratch and walking 2 miles every morning. Rosa, I'm serious. You want to show them you're not almost dead? Then live. Live longer and better than all of them. Let them watch you thrive while they... She gestured vaguely. Well, while they don't. It was a terrible suggestion. Vindictive and petty, and completely inappropriate for a good Christian woman to even consider. It was also, Evelyn realized, exactly what she wanted to do. That's awful, she said. Yes. It's mean-spirited and vengeful. Absolutely. They're my children. I should forgive them and move on. Should is a word for people who have time to waste. Rosa stood, smoothing her skirt. You want to forgive them? Fine. Forgive them from your 100th birthday party while they're all dead and buried. Evelyn stared at her friend, this woman who'd been the voice of reason and restraint for nearly 5 decades of their friendship. Who are you and what did you do with Rosa Martinez? I'm the woman who just watched her best friend get destroyed by her own children. And I'm tired of watching good people get trampled by selfish ones. Rosa's voice carried steel beneath the gentleness. You raised those children alone, Evelyn. You worked yourself to the bone to give them everything they needed. And this is how they repay you? By treating you like an inconvenience? The fire in Rosa's voice was infectious. Evelyn felt her own anger rekindling. Not the sharp pain of betrayal, but something cleaner and more focused. How would I even? I mean, what would that look like? Rosa grinned. And for a moment she looked like the young teacher who'd once convinced an entire class of troublemakers to memorize Shakespeare. Research. You always were the best at research. Find out what makes people live longer. Start doing it. All of it. That's crazy. So was teaching Romeo and Juliet to gang members. But we did that too. Evelyn found herself standing, pacing to the window that looked out over her small front yard. Tommy's truck was parked in the driveway, which meant he was probably passed out in the garage apartment again. Her almost 50-year-old son, living off her charity while dismissing her life as worthless. I can't throw my own birthday party now, she said slowly. Everyone will know what happened. So don't throw a party, do something better. Like what? Rosa joined her at the window, both women looking out at the quiet street where they'd lived as neighbors for 23 years. Like whatever you want. You're 89 years old, Evelyn. At this point, what do you have to lose? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. What did she have to lose? Her children's respect? Already gone. Her dignity? Already trampled. Her fear of being judged? Maybe it was time to stop caring about judgment. I kept one thing, Evelyn said quietly. From the party supplies. What? The tiara. The 90 and fabulous tiara. She turned to Rosa, feeling something like a smile tugging at her mouth for the first time in days. I thought maybe I should wear it. Every day. As a reminder. Rosa's answering grin was pure delight. Now you're talking, what else? I don't know. Learn things. Do things. Make them watch me live while they… She trailed off. The vindictive thought both thrilling and terrifying. While they what? While they don't. The two women stood at the window, 71 and 89 years old, plotting revenge with the enthusiasm of teenagers planning a prank. It should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing Evelyn had done in years. I'll need help, Evelyn said. You have help. I don't even know where to start. Start with living. Everything else will follow. Rosa was right, Evelyn realized. She'd spent 3 days mourning the end of something, when she should have been planning the beginning of something else. Something that would make her children regret every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment they'd treated her like a burden instead of the woman who'd given them life. They think I'm almost dead anyway, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Then prove them wrong. I will. The promise felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. I'm going to outlive them all. It was a terrible vow to make, unforgivable really. But as Evelyn looked at her reflection in the window, disheveled, hurt, but still very much alive, she found she didn't care about forgiveness anymore. She cared about proving a point. And she had all the time in the world to do it. 6 months later, Tommy Rodriguez nearly choked on his morning beer when he heard his mother's voice coming from his laptop. Good morning, my beautiful almost dead people. It's your girl Evelyn, coming at you live from Dallas, Texas. And let me tell you, I am feeling fabulous today. The voice was unmistakably his mother's, but the energy radiating from his computer screen belonged to someone he didn't recognize. On the small screen of her YouTube channel, Almost Dead Anyway, Evelyn Mae Rodriguez sat in her kitchen wearing full makeup, a bright pink sweater, and, dear God, was that a tiara? Today marks exactly 6 months since my loving children canceled my 90th birthday party because, and I quote, I'm quote, almost dead anyway. Her smile was sharp as a blade wrapped in velvet. Well, surprise, still here, still breathing, and still making tamales that would make your abuela weep with joy. Tommy fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking slightly, though whether from hangover or shock, he couldn't tell. The video had been posted 20 minutes ago and already had 300 views. His mother was on the internet. His mother had figured out YouTube. His mother was… Holy shit, he breathed, watching her expertly adjust the camera angle like she'd been doing this for years. Now for those of you just joining our little family, Evelyn continued, addressing the camera with the same confidence she'd once used to control unruly 8th graders. Let me catch you up. 6 months ago, I was a sad old lady feeling sorry for herself. Today, Today I'm a warrior princess of longevity, and honey, I am just getting started. The comments section was already lighting up with responses. Heart emojis. Laughing faces. You go, girl, and Queen energy from viewers whose profile pictures showed people young enough to be her great-grandchildren. Tommy's phone buzzed. Marcus, of course. Are you seeing this? Came his brother's voice without preamble. I'm watching it right now. How did she? She's been posting videos for 3 months, Tommy. 3 months. How did we not know about this? On screen, their mother was now demonstrating her morning routine, which apparently involved something called sunrise yoga and a breakfast smoothie made with ingredients Tommy couldn't pronounce. The woman who used to consider walking to the mailbox her daily exercise was now touching her toes with the flexibility of someone half her age. Did you know she joined a gym? Marcus's voice pitched higher with each word. A gym, Tommy. She's 89 years old. I live in her garage, Marcus. How would I not? Tommy stopped, realizing with growing horror that he actually hadn't known. He'd been so focused on his own problems, so lost in his daily routine of self-pity and alcohol, that he'd somehow missed his mother's complete transformation happening 20 feet away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Good morning, Rosa, Evelyn called out cheerfully, and the camera panned to show Rosa Martinez entering the kitchen. But this wasn't the Rosa Tommy remembered. This version wore bright red lipstick and a workout outfit that suggested she'd been part of whatever insanity his mother had embarked upon. Buenos dias, mis hermosos viewers! Rosa waved at the camera with the enthusiasm of a game show host. Ready for today's adventure? Adventure? Tommy croaked. We're going to learn how to change a tire, Evelyn announced, holding up a car manual like it was a trophy. Because at 90, there's no excuse for being helpless. Self-sufficiency is the ultimate revenge against ageism. The comments exploded with approval. Someone had donated $5 with a message that read, "You're my hero." Another viewer, username SassyGranny72, wrote, "Goals, teaching my granddaughter to be fierce like you." Tommy's phone buzzed again. This time it was Diana, her voice shrill with panic. Tommy, Marcus, conference call now. We have a situation. I'm already here, Marcus said grimly. We all are. We're all watching our mother become a social media influencer. This is insane, Diana whispered. She has 12,000 subscribers. 12,000! My book club has 6 people and we can barely coordinate a potluck. On screen, Evelyn was now outside, wearing coveralls that looked surprisingly good on her, expertly explaining the proper technique for loosening lug nuts. Where had she learned this? When had she learned this? And why did she look like she was having the time of her life? The comments, Diana continued, her voice rising. Have you read the comments? People are calling her inspirational. Someone wants to feature her in a magazine. A magazine, you guys? Tommy scrolled through the video feed, his stomach sinking with each post. His mother had 17 videos on her channel. 17. Learning French at 89. Zumba for the supposedly dead. Why I refuse to be invisible. Each one had thousands of views, hundreds of comments, people sharing stories about their own elderly relatives, and expressing outrage at families who dismissed their seniors. She's making us look like monsters, Marcus said flatly. We are monsters, Diana whispered. Oh God, we actually are, aren't we? Tommy wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. Because watching his mother on screen, vibrant, confident, radiating the kind of joy he hadn't seen from her in years, he realized Diana was right. They hadn't just canceled a party, they'd dismissed a human being. They'd written off someone who clearly had more life in her than any of them. We need damage control, Marcus said, his real estate agent training kicking in. This makes the whole family look bad. What if my clients see this? Your clients? Diana's voice cracked. Marcus, she's our mother. She's not a PR problem to manage. She is now. Look at this. The sound of typing came through the phone. She's tagged the location as Dallas. People are going to recognize the name Rodriguez. This affects all of us. On screen, Evelyn had successfully changed the tire and was now wiping her hands on a rag with satisfaction. "Remember, mi amor," she told the camera, "the people who count you out are usually the ones who never counted for much themselves. Don't let anyone else's limitations become your ceiling." The words hit Tommy like a physical blow. He thought about the last 6 months, the mornings he'd stumbled out of the garage apartment to find his mother already dressed and bustling around the kitchen. The afternoons when he'd heard voices and assumed she was watching TV, not realizing she was filming content for thousands of strangers who appreciated her more than her own children did. The evenings when he'd crashed on her couch, too drunk to make it back to the garage, and she'd covered him with a blanket without a word of complaint. She'd been transforming herself while he'd been wallowing. She'd been building a new life while he'd been destroying his. And she'd done it all while letting him live in her garage, eating her food, using her electricity, giving him kindness he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. "I have to go," he said suddenly. "Tommy, we need to figure out how to handle this," Marcus protested. "Handle what? Handle our mother being happy? Handle her proving that she's not almost dead?" His voice was getting louder, the anger surprising him. "Maybe the problem isn't her, Marcus. Maybe the problem is us." He hung up before his siblings could respond and stared at the computer screen where his mother was now chatting with viewers in real time, answering questions about her skincare routine and sharing tips for staying motivated. The woman who'd been broken by their cruelty had rebuilt herself into something stronger, something better, and she'd done it while he'd been passed out drunk in her backyard. The shame hit him like a wave, followed closely by something he hadn't felt in years: admiration. His mother, his 89-year-old mother, had more courage in her pinky finger than he'd shown in the last decade. She'd faced their rejection and turned it into rocket fuel. She'd taken their dismissal and transformed it into defiance. "Today's assignment," Evelyn was saying to the camera, "is to do one thing that scares you. One thing that challenges the story other people have written about who you're supposed to be. Because the most radical thing an older person can do in this society is refuse to disappear." Tommy closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of the garage apartment his mother had given him out of pure generosity. Around him were the remnants of his failed life: empty bottles, unpaid bills, promises he'd broken to himself and others. For months, he'd been the burden, the almost dead one, while she'd been busy proving that life could begin at any age. His phone buzzed with another call from Marcus, but Tommy ignored it. Instead, he walked to the small window that looked toward the main house, where he could see his mother through the kitchen window, still in her coveralls, still wearing that ridiculous tiara, looking more alive than he'd seen her in years. She'd kept her vow, he realized. She was outliving them all, not by waiting for them to die, but by choosing to live more fully than any of them dared. And maybe, if he could find the courage, it wasn't too late for him to start living too. The comments on her latest video continued to roll in, a stream of love and support from strangers who saw what her own children had been too blind to recognize. Evelyn Mae Rodriguez wasn't almost dead. She was just getting started. Jessica Chen discovered Evelyn Rodriguez at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, fueled by deadline desperation and her 4th cup of coffee. She'd been scrolling through TikTok for story ideas, a practice her journalism professors would have found appalling, but that had become essential survival in local news. Her assignment editor wanted human interest pieces that connect with younger demographics, which usually meant finding viral content featuring people over 60 doing unexpected things. The digital equivalent of, "look at this cute old person" segments that made her skin crawl. But this video was different. "Day 97 of proving I'm not almost dead anyway," announced an elderly Latina woman wearing a rhinestone tiara and what appeared to be motorcycle gear. "Today, I'm learning to ride a Harley because my granddaughter in Phoenix said I was too old for adventures." Challenge accepted, Mija. Jessica paused mid-scroll, coffee mug halfway to her lips. The woman on screen, the bio said Evelyn Rodriguez, age 89, was standing next to a gleaming motorcycle at what looked like a riding school, her silver hair perfectly styled beneath a helmet that sparkled with bedazzled skulls. Now, before you start typing "this is dangerous" in the comments, Evelyn continued, addressing the camera with the confidence of a seasoned broadcaster, let me remind you that I raised 5 children in the 80s, when car seats were suggestions and bicycle helmets were for, quote, sissies. I think I can handle a motorcycle. The video had 47,000 views and counting. The comments were a mix of encouragement and concern, but overwhelmingly supportive. More importantly, they were engaged. Real conversations about aging, family dynamics, and the courage to try new things. Jessica clicked through to Evelyn's channel. Almost Dead Anyway had 23 videos spanning 4 months, each one documenting the elderly woman's journey through activities that challenge stereotypes about aging. Learning French, taking a self-defense class, skydiving with an instructor who looked terrified to be jumping with someone old enough to be his great-grandmother. But it was the very first video that made Jessica sit up straighter. Hello, Internet. A much more subdued version of Evelyn spoke to the camera from what looked like a modest kitchen. My name is Evelyn Mae Rodriguez. I'm 89 years old, and 6 months ago my children canceled my 90th birthday party because I'm almost dead anyway. Today I'm starting a new life to prove them wrong. Jessica felt the familiar tingle that came with finding a real story. Not the manufactured outrage or feel-good fluff that filled most news cycles, but something authentic and complex. She clicked on the video description, which contained a longer explanation of the family's betrayal, written with surprising eloquence and a sharp wit that cut through the pain. They said the money would be better spent elsewhere, Evelyn had written, that I wouldn't remember the party anyway, that at my age celebrations were pointless gestures. So I decided to show them what pointless really looks like. 20 minutes later, Jessica had watched every single video and read every comment thread. She'd learned that Evelyn was a retired teacher who'd raised 5 children alone, that she'd started the channel with help from her neighbor Rosa, who appeared in several videos as a co-conspirator in adventures, that thousands of people from around the world had adopted her as an honorary grandmother, sharing stories of their own elderly relatives and expressing outrage at families who dismissed their seniors. More importantly, she'd learned that this wasn't just a story about an elderly woman proving her vitality. It was a story about ageism, family dysfunction, and the radical act of refusing to be invisible in a society that discarded its elders. Jessica glanced at the clock. 3:23 a.m. Too late to call anyone, but not too late to start researching. She pulled up property records for Dallas, looking for Evelyn Rodriguez's address. Found social media profiles for what appeared to be her children. Marcus, a real estate agent with a struggling practice. Diana, a suburban housewife whose Facebook was filled with anxiety about everything from school shootings to climate change. Tommy, whose sparse Instagram suggested someone battling addiction. The picture that emerged was heartbreakingly familiar. Adult children so consumed with their own problems that they'd lost sight of their mother as a complete human being. They'd seen burden instead of blessing, expense instead of opportunity, ending instead of continuation. By sunrise, Jessica had crafted a pitch email that she sent to her assignment editor, the producer of the morning show, and the station manager. But she already knew what she wanted to do, regardless of their response. This story deserved more than a 3-minute segment between weather and traffic. This story deserved a documentary. 3 days later, Jessica stood on Evelyn Rodriguez's front porch, her palms sweating despite the October heat. She'd called ahead, explaining her interest in featuring Evelyn's story, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of meeting someone who'd become a minor internet celebrity. The woman who answered the door was smaller than she'd appeared on camera, but her presence filled the doorway. Today's tiara was subtle, just a thin band of crystals that caught the afternoon light. Her makeup was flawless, her posture straight, and her eyes sharp with intelligence and wariness. Ms. Chen, I presume. Evelyn's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to controlling rooms full of teenagers. You're younger than I expected. 28, Jessica said, extending her hand. And you're exactly what I expected. Which is remarkable. Evelyn's laugh was genuine. Flattery will get you everywhere, Misha. Come in. Rosa made coffee, and she's been dying to meet a real reporter. The house was immaculate but lived in, filled with the kind of furniture that suggested decades of family gatherings. Photographs covered every surface: children at various ages, graduations, weddings, grandchildren. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and Rosa Martinez bustled around with the energy of someone half her age. "She's even prettier in person," Rosa announced, hugging Jessica like they were old friends. Sit. Tell us why you want to tell our Evelyn story." Jessica had prepared talking points about human interest and aging demographics, but sitting in this warm kitchen with these two remarkable women, the professional distance she usually maintained dissolved. "Because it's not fair," she heard herself saying. "What your family did to you, it's not fair, and it's not uncommon. My own grandmother." She paused, surprised by the emotion in her voice. "My own grandmother died in a nursing home where the staff treated her like she was already gone. Like her stories didn't matter, her feelings didn't count." Evelyn's expression softened. "What was her name?" "Lynn. Her name was Lynn. She raised me after my parents died, and she was brilliant. Spoke 4 languages, had taught herself to paint, could fix anything in the house. But when she got sick, suddenly none of that mattered. She was just another bed to change, another mouth to feed." Rosa reached across the table to squeeze Jessica's hand. "That's why this matters," she said gently. "Not just Evelyn's story, but all of our stories. We're not invisible yet." Yet being the operative word, Evelyn added dryly, "Society has a very clear timeline for when women become irrelevant. It starts at 50 and accelerates dramatically after 70. Jessica pulled out her phone, then hesitated. "Would it be okay if I recorded this?" "Not for broadcast. Just for my notes." "Record away," Evelyn said. "I've gotten comfortable with cameras lately." "How did this all start? I mean, really start? Beyond what you've shared online." Evelyn's smile faded slightly. She exchanged a glance with Rosa, who nodded encouragingly. "It started with tamales," Evelyn said finally. "I was making tamales for my birthday party, excited like a child at Christmas. I had everything planned: the guest list, the decorations, even hired a mariachi band. And my children walked into my kitchen and crushed it all like it was nothing. Like I was nothing." She paused, staring at her hands. The worst part wasn't the cancellation. It was the casual cruelty of it. Marcus on the phone, talking about me like I was already dead. "Almost dead anyway," he said. "As if my 90 years on this earth had no value, no weight, no meaning." "That must have been devastating," Jessica said softly. "It was. For about 3 days I wallowed in it. Felt sorry for myself, questioned whether they were right." Evelyn looked up, her eyes bright with defiance. "And then I got angry. Really angry. And I decided to prove them wrong in the most public way possible. Hence the YouTube channel. Rosa suggested I document my journey back to life. Make them watch me thrive while they," she shrugged, "while they stay exactly as miserable as they are." Jessica felt the story expanding in her mind, growing beyond a simple feature into something more complex and meaningful. "Has your family seen the videos?" Evelyn's grin was wicked. "Oh, they've seen them. Marcus called me last week, all concerned about family image and how my internet presence might affect his business. Diana sent me a text asking if I was going through something and offering to find me a nice therapist." "And Tommy?" The grin faded. Tommy's complicated. He lives in my garage apartment, and I see him watching sometimes, through the window, when he thinks I don't notice. But he hasn't said anything directly." Rosa leaned forward. "He's ashamed," she said simply. "He sees what his mother has become, strong, independent, celebrated, and he sees what he is. It's hard to face that contrast." Jessica nodded, understanding. The story was bigger than one woman's revenge against ageism. It was about family dynamics, addiction, the way trauma cascaded through generations. It was about what happened when someone refused to accept the limitations others placed on them. "I want to tell your story properly," she said. Not just a news segment, but a real documentary. Something that captures all of this. The pain, the transformation, the complexity of family relationships. Evelyn studied her for a long moment. What would that involve? Time. Lots of time. Following you around, documenting your daily life, your adventures. Interviewing your family if they'll agree to it. Maybe following you for a year or more, seeing where this journey takes you. And you'd want to be honest about all of it? The good and the bad? Especially the bad. The real story is always more complicated than the viral video. Evelyn exchanged another glance with Rosa, who shrugged as if to say, "Why not?" "Okay," Evelyn said finally. "But I have conditions." "Name them." First, Rosa gets co-producer credit. This is her story too. Second, I get final approval on how my family is portrayed. I may be angry with them, but I'm not interested in destroying them. And third, she paused, her expression growing serious. If you're going to follow me around with a camera, you better be prepared for anything. Because I'm not done proving I'm alive. Not by a long shot. Jessica grinned, feeling the familiar thrill of a story that would matter. What's next on the list? Evelyn's smile returned, bright and dangerous. Bungee jumping. And after that, maybe I'll learn to drive a race car. I figure if I'm going to outlive my children, I might as well have some fun doing it. As Jessica set up her camera for the first official interview, she realized she wasn't just documenting a woman's journey of self-discovery. She was capturing something much rarer, the story of someone who'd refused to go gentle into that good night. And from the gleam in Evelyn Rodriguez's eyes, Jessica suspected the best was yet to come. The call came on a Thursday morning while Evelyn was filming her weekly Wisdom Wednesday segment about conquering fear. "Fear," she told the camera, adjusting her latest tiara, a delicate silver piece with tiny pearls that caught the kitchen light, "is just excitement wearing a disguise. When you're my age, you realize that the things we spend our lives afraid of are usually—" Her phone rang, cutting through her practice delivery. She glanced at the screen with annoyance, ready to let it go to voicemail, when she saw Diana's name. Her daughter never called this early unless something was wrong. "Hold that thought, Miss Amores," she told her viewers, reaching for the phone. "Family emergency protocols, you understand." Jessica, who'd been operating the camera from behind the kitchen island, kept filming. After 3 months of documenting Evelyn's journey, she'd learned that the real moments, the unscripted ones, often revealed the most truth. "Diana, what's wrong?" Her daughter's voice came through broken, hysterical. "Mom, it's Marcus. Oh God, Mom, he's dead." The words hit Evelyn like cold water. She felt her carefully constructed world tilt. The confident woman she'd spent 18 months building suddenly feeling as fragile as tissue paper. What happened? Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. Distant, professional, like she was asking about someone else's crisis. Heart attack. Massive heart attack. He was showing a house in Preston Hollow, and he just collapsed. The buyers called 911, but by the time the paramedics got there, Diana's words dissolved into sobs. Evelyn stared at the camera, Jessica's face behind it filled with concern and uncertainty. Around them, the kitchen that had become the headquarters of her rebellion felt suddenly hollow. The tamales cooling on the counter, the almost dead anyway banner hanging cheerfully in the window, the carefully arranged lighting that made her look 10 years younger, it all seemed like set pieces in a play she no longer wanted to perform. "Where are you?" she asked. "At the hospital. Tommy's here too. Mom, he's not handling this well. Can you come?" Evelyn looked down at her outfit, a bright purple sweater she'd chosen specifically because it photographed well, paired with the pearl tiara that had become part of her brand. She looked like she was dressed for a party, not a funeral. "I'll be right there." She hung up and sat in silence for a moment, the phone still in her hands. Jessica lowered the camera, uncertain whether to keep recording this intensely private moment. "Marcus is dead," Evelyn said finally, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "Heart attack. 55 years old." She should feel something, she thought. Grief, certainly. Relief that her suffering had ended. Horror at the vindication of her dark predictions. But instead, she felt strangely empty, as if the news had drained all emotion from the room. "I'm so sorry," Jessica said softly. "Do you want me to stop filming?" Evelyn considered this. For months, she'd been documenting her journey of defiance, her refusal to be dismissed, her determination to outlive the children who'd written her off as almost dead anyway. Now one of them actually was dead, and she was still here, still breathing, still very much alive. "No," she said finally, "keep filming. This is part of the story too." Rosa appeared in the doorway, having heard the conversation from the living room where she'd been reading. Her face was grave with understanding. "¿Qué necesitas, mi amor?" she asked gently. "I need to go to the hospital. And I need—" Evelyn looked down at her festive outfit, the costume of her rebellion. "I need to change clothes. This doesn't feel right anymore." The hospital smelled like disinfectant and false hope. Evelyn found Diana and Tommy in the family waiting area, both looking smaller than she remembered. Diana was crumpled in a plastic chair, her face blotchy from crying. Tommy stood by the window, his hands shaking, whether from shock or withdrawal. Evelyn couldn't tell. When Diana saw her, she launched herself from the chair and into her mother's arms, with surprising force. Evelyn held her daughter, feeling the tremors of grief running through Diana's body, and experienced the first real emotion since the phone call: maternal protectiveness. Whatever anger she'd carried toward her children, watching Diana fall apart unlocked something deeper and older. "I'm sorry," Diana sobbed against her mother's shoulder. "I'm so sorry for everything. For the party, for not standing up to Marcus, for being such a coward." "Shmija, not now. Grief first, apologies later." Tommy approached them cautiously, his eyes red-rimmed and lost. "Mom, he was just here yesterday, yelling at me about the rent for the garage apartment, complaining about your YouTube thing. How is he just gone?" Evelyn reached out and pulled her youngest son into the embrace, holding both her surviving children like she had when they were small and the world was scary. For a moment, the complicated dynamics of the past 2 years fell away, replaced by the simple truth that they were a family united in loss. "Where is he?" she asked quietly. Diana pulled back, wiping her eyes. "They moved him to the morgue already. We can see him if we want. But Mom, he looks so— I want to see him." "Are you sure?" Evelyn nodded. She needed to see Marcus, needed to confirm the reality of his death. Part of her, the vindictive part that had carried her through the past 18 months, needed to see that her prediction had come true. But a larger part, the mother part, needed to say goodbye to the little boy who used to climb into her bed during thunderstorms. Marcus looked smaller in death. His face relaxed in a way it rarely had been in life. The lines of stress and worry had smoothed away, leaving behind something that resembled the young man he'd been before. Mortgages and divorces and financial pressures had hardened him into someone she barely recognized. Evelyn stood beside the hospital bed, Jessica filming discreetly from the corner with Diana's reluctant permission. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was documenting the moment her dark vow began to come true. "He looks peaceful," she said finally, reaching out to touch his hand. It was cold, already beginning the process of leaving the world behind. "He was so stressed lately," Diana whispered. "The real estate market has been terrible, and his ex-wife was demanding more alimony, and he was working 16-hour days trying to keep up." Evelyn nodded, understanding flooding through her. Marcus hadn't been cruel because he was evil. He'd been cruel because he was drowning. In debt, in expectations, in the weight of being the oldest son who was supposed to have all the answers. He'd canceled her party not because he didn't love her, but because love felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. "I forgive you, Mijo," she whispered to his still form. "I forgive you for everything." The words surprised her with their honesty. She did forgive him. The anger that had fueled her transformation, the hurt that had driven her to prove her vitality, it was still there, but underneath it was something deeper. The love of a mother for a child who'd lost his way. Tommy broke down then, loud sobs that echoed off the hospital walls. "It should have been me," he choked out. I'm the screw-up. I'm the one drinking myself to death. It should have been me." "Don't you dare." Evelyn turned to him, her voice sharp with authority. "Don't you dare wish that. Marcus made his choices, lived his life the way he thought he had to. You're still here, Tommy. You still get to make different choices." She pulled him close again, this son, who was drowning in his own way, and felt the weight of outliving her children settling on her shoulders. She'd wanted to prove she wasn't almost dead, and she had. But the cost was becoming clear. Being the survivor meant watching everyone else leave first. The funeral was small, attended mostly by Marcus's real estate colleagues and a few family friends. Evelyn sat in the front pew between Diana and Tommy, wearing a simple black dress instead of her usual bright colors. The tiara felt wrong for the occasion, so she'd left it at home, her silver hair styled simply. Jessica sat several rows back, camera discreetly recording this chapter of Evelyn's story. Some of her YouTube viewers had sent flowers and condolences, these strangers who'd adopted her as an honorary grandmother showing more support than some of her own relatives. Father Miguel delivered the eulogy, speaking about redemption and the complexity of human relationships. He'd visited Evelyn the night before, helping her process the guilt that came with getting what she'd wished for. "Correlation is not causation, Mija," he'd told her gently. "Your anger didn't kill Marcus. His lifestyle, his stress, his genetics, those killed Marcus. You wanting to outlive him didn't make it happen." But sitting in the church where she'd planned to hold her 90th birthday party, watching her eldest son's casket covered in white roses, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she'd somehow wished this into existence. After the service, as people filed past to offer condolences, she overheard two of Marcus's colleagues talking. "Such a shame, he was so young, 55, can you believe it? All that stress though, guy was working himself to death. Never took care of himself. At least his mother's holding up well. How old is she? She looks amazing for her age." Evelyn almost laughed at the irony. Here she was, the supposedly almost dead woman, comforting mourners at her son's funeral. She'd outlived Marcus, just as she'd vowed to do, but victory felt nothing like she'd imagined. It felt like being the last person standing in a game no one should have to play. That night, back in her kitchen with Rosa and Jessica, Evelyn sat in front of the camera one more time. She'd removed the cheerful banner from the window, and the space felt different without it. More serious, more real. "Today I buried my son," she told her viewers, her voice steady but subdued. "Marcus died of a heart attack at 55, and I outlived him. Just like I said I would." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Some of you might think this is vindication. Proof that I was right to be angry, right to seek revenge through longevity. But let me tell you something about getting what you wish for. It's not what you think it will be." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't want to outlive my children to prove a point. I wanted to outlive them because I was hurt and angry and felt powerless. But Marcus dying doesn't make me more alive. It just makes me more alone." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what this means for our journey together. I don't know if I want to keep fighting to prove I'm not almost dead, when being alive means watching everyone I love leave first. But I'll figure it out. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We keep going, even when we don't know why." The camera kept rolling as Evelyn sat in silence, the weight of unwanted victory settling around her like a shroud. She'd proven she wasn't almost dead. But she was beginning to understand that there were worse things than dying. Sometimes, being the survivor was the cruelest fate of all. 2 weeks after Marcus's funeral, Diana knocked on Evelyn's door carrying a casserole dish and what looked like 20 years of unspoken apologies. "I made your favorite," she said when Evelyn opened the door. "King Ranch chicken. I know it's not as good as yours, but I thought maybe—" She trailed off, her voice uncertain in a way that reminded Evelyn of the little girl Diana had once been, always afraid of saying the wrong thing. Evelyn looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. Diana had lost weight since the funeral, her face drawn with grief and what appeared to be sleepless nights. Her usually perfect suburban mom appearance was disheveled, hair unwashed, makeup-free in a way that suggested she'd stopped caring about keeping up appearances. "Come in, Mita," Evelyn said gently, stepping aside. Rosa's making coffee. They sat at the kitchen table where, 18 months ago, Marcus had delivered the news that shattered everything. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Diana placed the casserole between them, like an offering, her hands shaking slightly. Mom, I need to say something. I've been practicing it for days, but now I'm here and I don't know how to. Diana's voice cracked. I was a coward. With the birthday party, with Marcus, with everything. I let him speak for all of us because it was easier than standing up to him. Rosa emerged from the kitchen with coffee, setting cups in front of both women before retreating to give them privacy. The documentary camera sat unused in the corner. Jessica had agreed to give the family space for this conversation. You were scared, Evelyn said simply. I understand scared. No, you don't. Diana's voice was sharper than usual, surprising them both. You've never been scared the way I have. You raised 5 kids alone after Daddy died. You faced down school boards and difficult parents and life itself. I can't even stand up to my own husband when he tells me my dreams don't matter. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Evelyn reached across the table to cover Diana's hand with her own. Tell me about your dreams. Diana laughed, but it sounded more like crying. You'll think it's stupid. Try me. I wanted to be a teacher. Like you. I had my degree, was all set to student teach, and then I met David and he said teaching was a nice hobby for women, but not a real career, that I should focus on being a wife and mother instead. She looked up at Evelyn with tears in her eyes. I gave up everything to make him happy, and I still can't make him happy. The words broke something open in Evelyn's chest. She thought of all the times Diana had mentioned wanting to help with the YouTube channel, to be part of Evelyn's new adventures, only to back down whenever her husband called. It's not too late, Evelyn said. I'm 52, Mom. Who wants a 52-year-old teacher with no experience? Who wants an 89-year-old YouTuber? Apparently, 12,000 people and counting. Evelyn's smile was gentle but determined. The question isn't whether it's too late. The question is whether you're ready to stop letting other people decide what you're capable of. They talked for 2 hours. Really talked, in a way they hadn't, since Diana was a teenager. Diana shared her fears about David's control, her regrets about the missed opportunities, her guilt over standing by while Marcus canceled the birthday party. Evelyn listened without judgment, recognizing in her daughter's story the same themes that had driven her own rebellion. I want to help, Diana said finally. With your channel, your message, whatever you're doing next, I want to be part of it. What about David? Diana's jaw set with new determination. David doesn't get a vote anymore. Tommy's reconciliation attempt came 3 days later, but it looked different. Instead of casseroles and apologies, he showed up at 6 in the morning, sober and carrying a toolbox. Your back gate is sagging, he announced when Evelyn opened the door in her robe. And the garage apartment needs new weather stripping. Figured I should start earning my keep around here. He'd been living in her garage for 3 years, paying sporadic rent when his odd jobs came through, drinking away most of what he earned. But the man standing on her doorstep looked different. Steadier, more present. Since when do you do home repair? She asked. Since I realized my mother could die before I got my shit together, and I'd spend the rest of my life knowing I was nothing but a burden to the woman who gave me everything. The honesty in his voice stopped her from making a joke about his language. She'd heard Tommy make promises before, to get sober, to find steady work, to be better. But this felt different. Maybe it was Marcus's death, the stark reminder of mortality. Maybe it was watching his mother transform herself at nearly 90, while he stayed stuck in the same patterns of failure. You don't have to earn your place here, Tommy. You're my son. Yeah, well, being your son should mean more than taking up space and drinking your beer. He hefted the toolbox. Marcus was right about one thing. I've been acting like a burden instead of family. Time to change that. Over the next week, Tommy worked on the house with surprising skill and dedication. He fixed the sagging gate, replaced weather stripping, painted the garage apartment, and tackled a dozen small repairs that Evelyn had been putting off. He worked quietly, methodically, And most importantly, sober. Dr. Sarah Williams stopped by on Thursday for Evelyn's regular checkup, but the conversation quickly turned to the psychological impact of recent events. "How are you processing Marcus's death?" Dr. Williams asked, setting down her stethoscope. "It's complicated, outliving a child under any circumstances." "It is." Evelyn sat on the edge of her examination table, feeling every one of her 90 years. "I got what I wanted, Sarah. I outlived him. I proved I wasn't almost dead. But victory feels a lot like punishment. Survivor's guilt is common. The fact that you'd had conflict with Marcus before his death doesn't change the fundamental relationship. You're his mother. You're supposed to protect him, not outlive him. I keep thinking about that phone call. When he said I was almost dead anyway, I was so angry, so hurt. And now he's the one who's gone, and I'm still here making YouTube videos about living my best life." Dr. Williams leaned forward, her expression serious. "Evelyn, Marcus died because of lifestyle factors. Stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, probably genetics. He didn't die because you were angry with him. Correlation isn't causation. Everyone keeps telling me that. Because it's true. And because guilt serves no one, especially not Marcus's memory." She paused. "What would serve his memory is you continuing to live fully, and maybe helping your other children do the same." That evening, Diana returned with David in tow. Evelyn hadn't seen her son-in-law in months, and the man who entered her kitchen looked uncomfortable and somewhat resentful. "Diana says you're supporting her going back to school," he said without preamble, his tone suggesting this was somehow Evelyn's fault. "I'm supporting Diana making her own choices," Evelyn replied calmly. "At 52, I think she's old enough to decide what she wants to do with her life. It's impractical. We have a mortgage, responsibilities. Teaching doesn't pay enough to justify the expense of education." Evelyn looked at Diana, who stood slightly behind her husband, her newfound determination wavering in the face of his opposition. This was the moment that mattered. Would Diana retreat into her old patterns, or would she find the courage to claim her life? "David," Diana said quietly, "I'm doing this, with or without your support." The transformation was small but profound. Diana stepped forward, moving from behind her husband to beside him, claiming physical space that matched her emotional declaration. "You can't be serious," David said. "I'm 52 years old, and I've never done anything just for me. I've made your dinners, raised your children, managed your social calendar, and kept your house. I've earned the right to chase one dream." Evelyn watched her daughter claim her power, feeling a pride that had nothing to do with vindication and everything to do with love. This was what outliving meant, not just breathing longer, but creating space for others to grow. The family dinner that followed was awkward but honest. David sulked, Diana glowed with newfound purpose, and Tommy quietly served the meal he'd prepared, another small step toward becoming the man he wanted to be. As they sat around the table where so much pain had begun, Evelyn realized something had shifted. They were still a broken family, still carrying years of hurt and missed connections. But they were trying to heal, and that effort mattered more than the outcome. After David left and Diana was helping with dishes, she turned to her mother with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me it's never too late to start over." Evelyn hugged her daughter, feeling the weight of being the survivor settle into something that felt less like burden and more like responsibility. She'd outlived Marcus, but maybe the real victory wasn't in the outliving. Maybe it was in using whatever time remained to help the people she loved learn how to truly live. Diana's acceptance letter to the University of North Texas teaching program arrived on the same day as her cancer diagnosis. Evelyn found her daughter sitting in her car in the driveway at 3 in the afternoon, engine off, both pieces of mail clutched in her hands like contradictory messages from the universe. Through the windshield, Diana's face was a map of devastation, triumph and terror warring across features that had grown more confident over the past 6 months. "Maisha?" Evelyn tapped on the window, her heart already knowing what her mind refused to accept. Diana rolled down the window with shaking hands. "I got in," she whispered, holding up the acceptance letter. "Full scholarship based on life experience and essay. They said my story about finding purpose at 52 was inspiring." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," That's... And I have pancreatic cancer. The words came out flat, matter of fact, as if stating them simply might drain them of power. Stage 3, Dr. Patterson says. She swallowed hard. He says maybe 6 months, maybe less. The world tilted sideways. Evelyn gripped the car door frame, feeling the cruel mathematics of loss calculating themselves in her chest. Marcus at 55. Now Diana at 54. Her children were disappearing in reverse order, like the universe was systematically dismantling the family she'd built from the ground up. What does that mean exactly? Stage 3? It means it's spread, but not everywhere. It means treatment might buy me time, but probably won't save me. Diana looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed decades older than they'd been that morning. It means I finally found the courage to chase my dreams, and now I won't live long enough to catch them. Evelyn opened the car door and somehow folded her 91-year-old body into the passenger seat, her joints protesting the awkward angle. She took Diana's hands, her daughter's hands that had helped make tamales for the canceled birthday party, that had signed the acceptance letter she dreamed of for 30 years, that would soon be too weak to hold anything at all. "We fight," she said simply. "Mom, we fight. Treatment, second opinions, experimental therapies, whatever it takes. You didn't find your voice just to lose it now." Diana's laugh was hollow. What if fighting just means more pain and the same ending? Evelyn thought of her YouTube channel, of the 18 months she'd spent proving she wasn't almost dead, of the dark vow that had brought her to this moment. Then we make sure the journey matters more than the destination. The next 3 months became a masterclass in the mathematics of hope versus reality. Diana started chemotherapy on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she was too sick to stand for more than 10 minutes. By the following week, she'd moved into Evelyn's house temporarily, a fiction they both maintained even as Evelyn converted her sewing room into a bedroom and Tommy installed grab bars in the bathroom. David came by twice in the first month, each visit more awkward than the last. During his second visit, he stood in the living room holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers and announced that he thought Diana should, quote, consider her options realistically. What options? Diana asked from the recliner, where she spent most of her days now, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf that Rosa had bought to replace the hair chemo had stolen. I mean, maybe you should focus on getting your affairs in order instead of this treatment that's making you so sick. Quality time instead of this. The silence that followed was arctic. Tommy, who'd been quietly organizing Diana's medications, looked up with an expression Evelyn had never seen on his face. Pure, protective fury. "Get out," Tommy said quietly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Get out of my mother's house before I throw you out." David sputtered about rights and marriage and legal obligations, but Tommy stood up, all 6 feet of him, sober and solid and angrier than Evelyn had ever seen him. And David decided discretion was the better part of valor. After he left, Diana cried for an hour. Not about dying, she told them, but about the 28 years she'd wasted with a man who couldn't love her enough to fight for her life. "I should have left him years ago," she whispered. "You left him now," Evelyn said. "That's what matters." Jessica documented everything with a sensitivity that surprised Evelyn. The young journalist had become more than a documentarian. She was family now, bringing groceries without being asked, researching alternative treatments on her laptop while Diana slept, holding the camera steady during the hardest conversations. "I want to keep filming," Diana told Jessica during one of her better days in month 2. "For the documentary. I want people to see this part too." "Are you sure? We can stop any time." If Mom's story is about refusing to be invisible, then this is part of it. Cancer tries to make you invisible too. It tries to reduce you to just a patient, just a disease. I won't let it. So Jessica filmed Diana teaching Evelyn how to use the university's online portal, submitting her withdrawal from the teaching program she'd never get to complete. She filmed Diana writing letters to the grandchildren she might not see grow up, her hands shaking but her words clear. She filmed the afternoon Diana spent teaching Rosa how to make her famous tres leches cake, determined that someone would carry the recipe forward. "The secret," Diana whispered to Rosa, her voice hoarse from medication, "is the vanilla. Real vanilla, not extract. And you have to fold in the condensed milk slowly, like you're praying." "Like praying," Rosa repeated, writing everything down. Father Miguel started visiting weekly, officially to provide spiritual comfort, but really because he'd grown fond of this family's complicated faith. He found them one evening in the kitchen, Diana in her wheelchair now, too weak to manage the walker, attempting to make tamales for Christmas. "This is ambitious," he observed, watching Evelyn try to manage masa while Diana directed from her chair. "She wants them to be perfect," Evelyn said, "for Tommy and the neighbors. She says if these are her last tamales, they better be legendary." "They will be," Diana said firmly. "Not because of the recipe, but because of the love. That's what makes food legendary, the love you put into it." Father Miguel rolled up his sleeves. "Well then, we better put in extra love. Show me what to do." They worked together for 3 hours, 4 generations of hands shaping masa and filling, while Diana supervised with the authority of someone determined to pass on more than recipes. The tamales were perfect, not just the taste, but the memory of making them together. Diana died on a Thursday morning in February, exactly 8 months after her diagnosis, and 2 months longer than the doctors had predicted. She'd been lucid until the end, spending her final week saying goodbye to everyone in her own way. To Tommy, she gave her collection of books and a letter thanking him for becoming the man she'd always known he could be. To Rosa, she gave her grandmother's rosary and instructions to keep making Evelyn laugh. To Jessica, she gave permission to tell the whole truth, even the parts that hurt. To Evelyn, she gave the hardest gift of all, forgiveness and understanding. "I'm not angry about the time we lost," Diana whispered during one of their last conversations. "I'm grateful for the time we found. You showed me it was never too late to be brave. Even if I only got to be brave for a few months, at least I knew what it felt like." Evelyn held her daughter's hand as Diana slipped away, feeling the cruel weight of being the survivor settle more heavily on her shoulders. 2 children now, 2 of her babies gone before her, defying every natural order of the universe. The funeral was larger than Marcus's. Diana had made friends during her brief semester of preparation for teaching, cancer support group members who'd watched her fight with grace, neighbors who'd witnessed her transformation from invisible housewife to woman claiming her power. Tommy delivered the eulogy, his voice steady and clear for the first time in years. "My sister Diana spent most of her life making herself small so other people could feel big," he said. "But in her last months, she remembered how to take up space. She remembered that her dreams mattered, her voice mattered, her life mattered. She died knowing who she was supposed to be. Not everyone gets that gift." After the service, as they stood by Diana's grave, Tommy put his arm around his mother's shoulders. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly. "Do you? You're thinking this is all your fault somehow, that wanting to outlive us made it happen." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "The thought has occurred to me." "It's bullshit, Mom. Marcus killed himself with stress and poor choices. Diana's cancer was genetics and bad luck. You loving us enough to want us to see your strength, that didn't cause any of this. Then why does it feel like punishment?" Tommy was quiet, thinking. Maybe because being the survivor is supposed to feel like punishment. Maybe that's how we know we really loved them. As they walked away from the cemetery, Evelyn realized that Tommy had become the wisest of her children, not despite his struggles, but because of them. He understood pain and loss and the weight of living with consequences. He also understood something else, that love sometimes meant carrying the burden of being the one left behind. That night, alone in her kitchen for the first time in months, Evelyn sat before the camera one more time. "I buried my daughter today," she told her viewers, her voice steady but hollow. Diana was 54. She died 8 months after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and 6 months after finding the courage to chase her dreams. She paused, looking around the kitchen where Diana had spent her final months, where they'd made tamales and shared stories and learned to forgive each other. "I wanted to outlive my children to prove I wasn't almost dead," Now I've outlived 2 of them, and I understand the difference between winning and surviving. Winning means everyone gets what they deserve. Surviving just means you're still breathing when everyone else stops. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't know if I want to keep fighting to prove I'm alive when being alive means watching everyone I love die first. But Diana made me promise to keep going. She said the world needs more old women who refuse to disappear. Evelyn looked directly into the camera, her eyes bright with unshed tears. So I'll keep going. Not because I want to outlive anyone anymore, but because someone has to remember. Someone has to carry their stories forward. The camera kept recording as Evelyn sat in the silence of her empty house, the weight of unwanted victory heavier than ever. She'd proven she wasn't almost dead, but she was beginning to understand that being the last one standing wasn't a victory at all. It was the hardest job in the world. Tommy found his mother on the 7th day after Diana's funeral, still wearing the same black dress she'd worn to the cemetery. She sat in her father's old recliner, staring at the blank wall where her "almost dead anyway" banner used to hang before she'd torn it down in a fit of rage and grief. "Mom?" His voice was gentle, careful. In the past week, he'd watched Evelyn retreat so far into herself that he'd begun to fear she might simply will herself to stop existing. She didn't respond. The house felt like a tomb. Curtains drawn, flowers from the funeral service wilting in their vases, sympathy cards piled unopened on the kitchen table. Her YouTube channel had gone silent. Rosa's calls went unanswered. Even Jessica had been turned away at the door, camera equipment and all. "I know you can hear me," Tommy continued, settling onto the couch across from her. Sobriety had taught him patience, and grief had taught him that sometimes the most important conversations happened in silence first. "I killed them." The words came out like a confession, so quiet he almost missed them. "What?" "Marcus, Diana. I killed them both." Evelyn's voice was hollow, empty of the fire that had carried her through 2 years of transformation. "My anger, my vow to outlive them. It's a curse. I cursed my own children." Tommy felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd been worried about his mother's grief, but this was something darker. This was his mother, the woman who'd taught school for 40 years, who'd raised 5 children with logic and love, talking about curses like they were medical diagnoses. "Mom, that's grief talking, not truth. 2 children, Tommy. 2 of my babies dead before me. That's not natural. That's not right." She finally looked at him, and he was shocked by what he saw. Her eyes, usually so bright with intelligence and mischief, were dulled with a pain so deep it seemed to have hollowed her out from the inside. "People die, Mom. It's awful and unfair, but it's not supernatural." I wished for it. The confession came out in a rush, like poison she'd been holding in her mouth for too long. "I sat in that chair, right there, and I wished to outlive them all. I made a vow to prove I wasn't almost dead by watching them die first. And now they are. Both of them. Gone." Tommy leaned forward, his heart breaking for this woman who'd somehow twisted her survival into guilt. "Mom, Marcus died because he worked himself to death and never took care of his health. Diana died because cancer is a bastard that doesn't care how good or bad someone is. Neither of them died because you were angry." "How do you know?" The question came out sharp, desperate. "How can you be sure?" "I wanted them to regret treating me like I was worthless. I wanted them to watch me live while they—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "While they what?" "While they lived their own lives?" "Mom, wanting to prove your worth didn't give Marcus a heart attack. Being hurt didn't cause Diana's cancer." But even as he said the words, Tommy could see they weren't penetrating the fortress of guilt his mother had built around herself. She'd taken her grief and her survivor's guilt and twisted them into something that made her the villain of her own story. "I should call Rosa," he said, reaching for his phone. "No." The word came out harsh, commanding. "No more visitors. No more cameras. No more pretending this is all some inspiring story about an old woman finding her strength." "It's not inspiring, Tommy. It's a horror story about a mother who wished her children dead and got what she wanted. That's not what happened, isn't it? She turned to face him fully for the first time, and he saw the depth of her anguish. I made that channel, Tommy. Almost dead anyway. Every video was about proving them wrong, about showing them I could outlive them all. And now Marcus is in the ground, and Diana's ashes are in an urn on my dresser, and I'm still here making tamales and YouTube videos, like some kind of ghoul celebrating at a funeral. The words hung between them, heavy with self-recrimination. Tommy felt the weight of being the last child, the one who'd have to carry both his mother's guilt and his own grief. You want to know what I think? He said finally. I'm not sure I do. I think you're scared, not of dying. You've never been scared of dying. You're scared of living. Because living means accepting that sometimes terrible things happen for no reason, and good people suffer, and love doesn't protect anyone from anything. Evelyn stared at him, her face unreadable. And I think you're making yourself the villain, because it's easier than accepting that you're just a woman who lost her children to the same random cruelty that takes everyone's children eventually. That's very wise, she said finally, her voice still hollow. When did you become so wise? When I started paying attention instead of drowning in beer bottles. When I realized my mother was the strongest person I knew, and I was wasting the chance to learn from her. A car door slammed outside, followed by the sound of familiar footsteps on the front porch. Rosa's voice called through the door. Evelyn Rodriguez, I know you're in there, and I'm not leaving until you open this door. I've been patient for a week, but my patience has run out. Tommy looked at his mother, who had shrunk back into her chair like she could disappear entirely. She's worried about you. We all are. I can't, Evelyn whispered. I can't pretend to be strong anymore. I can't keep telling people that age is just a number, and life begins at 90, when all I've really proven is that sometimes living too long means watching everyone you love die first. The knocking continued, insistent and loving. Rosa's voice came again, gentler this time. Am I amor? I know you're hurting. I know you think this is your fault somehow. But hiding from the world won't bring them back, and it won't honor their memory either. Tommy watched his mother's face crumple, 40 years of held-back tears finally demanding their release. He moved to the chair and gathered her in his arms, this woman who'd seemed invincible just weeks ago, now feeling fragile as paper in his embrace. I don't know how to keep going, she sobbed against his shoulder. I don't know how to live with being the survivor. You don't have to know, he said softly. You just have to keep breathing. One day at a time. That's all any of us can do. Outside, Rosa had apparently found her spare key. The front door opened, and Tommy heard her gasp at the state of the house. Footsteps approached the living room, and then Rosa appeared in the doorway, her face a map of concern and determination. Ay, Dios mío, she whispered, taking in the scene. What have you done to yourself, mi amor? I've stopped pretending, Evelyn said without lifting her head from Tommy's shoulder. I've stopped pretending I'm strong enough for this. Rosa approached slowly, like she was approaching a wounded animal. Strength isn't about carrying everything alone, Misha. It's about knowing when to let others help carry the load. I killed them, Rosa. I wished them dead, and now they are. Rosa's expression shifted from concern to something fiercer. Evelyn Mae Rodriguez, you raised me to be a logical woman, so don't insult my intelligence with superstitious nonsense. You didn't wish your children dead. You wished to prove your own life had value. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. And if you can't see it right now, then we'll wait until you can. But we're not letting you disappear into this guilt. Your children, all 3 of them, need you to be here. The living one especially. Tommy felt his mother's body shake with fresh sobs, but also felt something else, a loosening, like a knot beginning to untangle. Maybe healing could begin with simply admitting that some weights were too heavy to carry alone. Father Miguel found them in the kitchen 3 weeks later, Rosa at the stove making coffee, Tommy organizing pill bottles that hadn't been touched in days. and Evelyn sitting at the table in her robe, staring at a laptop screen she hadn't opened. "Buenos dias, familia," he said gently, hanging his jacket on the back of a chair. "How are we doing today?" "Better," Rosa answered, though her eyes suggested this was more hope than truth. "She got dressed yesterday, and she ate half a tamale." Evelyn looked up at the priest who'd become more friend than spiritual advisor over the past 2 years. "I suppose you're here to tell me about God's plan and how everything happens for a reason. Actually, I was hoping you'd tell me about your plan, the one where you figure out what comes next." The directness surprised her. She'd been expecting platitudes about faith and acceptance, not questions about the future. "I don't have a plan. Planning seems presumptuous when you've managed to outlive 2 of your children." Father Miguel pulled out his phone and scrolled to something. "I've been reading the comments on your last video. The one about Diana. Do you want to know what people are saying? I'm sure they're very sorry for my loss and think I'm inspirational for continuing to... They're asking for help." He turned the phone toward her. "This woman in Oregon wants to know how to talk to her family about ageism. This man in Florida is caring for his 95-year-old mother and feels overwhelmed. This teenager is asking how to convince her grandmother to stop apologizing for being a burden." Evelyn glanced at the screen, then away. "I'm not qualified to help anyone. I couldn't even help my own children live. You helped Diana find her voice before she died. You helped Tommy get sober. You're helping thousands of people feel less invisible just by existing online. Miguel, I'm not saying this to make you feel better. I'm saying it because sitting in that chair feeling guilty about things you can't control is a waste of the time you have left. And time is the one thing you can't outlive." The words hit harder than any sermon he'd ever delivered. Evelyn felt something stir in her chest. Not the old fire of defiance, but something quieter and more purposeful. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe outliving people isn't the victory. Maybe the victory is helping people live better while they're here." The first video took her 3 attempts to record. "Hello, my beautiful almost dead family," she began, her voice hoarse from disuse. "It's been a difficult few weeks. As many of you know, I lost my daughter Diana to cancer in February. She was 54 years old, and she died 8 months after finally finding the courage to chase her dreams." She paused, looking directly into the camera that Jessica was operating with unusual reverence. They'd spent an hour discussing whether Evelyn was ready for this, whether returning to YouTube was healing or performance. "I've been sitting in my living room for 3 weeks, convinced that my anger somehow killed my children, that wanting to outlive them made it happen. Which is, as my friend Rosa pointed out, superstitious nonsense from a woman who should know better." Rosa smiled from her spot behind the camera, giving Evelyn an encouraging nod. "But grief makes us believe strange things. It makes us think we have more power over the universe than we actually do. And it makes us forget that the people who love us need us to keep living, not just surviving." She held up a printed email. "This is from Sarah, in Portland." She writes, "My family treats my 87-year-old grandmother like she's already gone. They talk about her like she can't hear them, make decisions for her without asking, and seem annoyed when she wants to participate in family events. How do I help her feel valued again?" Evelyn set the email down, feeling something like her old teaching instincts awakening. "Sarah, here's what you do. You ask your grandmother to teach you something. It doesn't matter what. Cooking, knitting, stories about the family, whatever she knows that you don't. Because the fastest way to make someone feel valuable is to treat their knowledge as precious." She picked up another email. This one is from Michael in Tampa. "I'm taking care of my father who has dementia. Some days he doesn't recognize me, and I feel like I'm grieving someone who's still alive. How do you find joy in caregiving when it feels hopeless?" Her voice softened. "Michael, you find joy in the moments, not the outcomes. Maybe your father doesn't remember your name, but he might remember how safe he feels when you're there. Love doesn't require recognition to be real." The emails kept coming, dozens of them, from children and grandchildren and elderly people themselves, all asking variations of the same question. How do you maintain dignity and connection when society has written you off? Tommy appeared in her videos gradually, first as a voice off camera, then helping with technical aspects, finally sitting beside her to share his own perspective. "People ask me what it's like to be the surviving kid," he said during a video about family dynamics and addiction. "Like somehow I won by not dying first. But that's not how it works. I'm not the winner. I'm the one left with the responsibility of carrying forward what my family taught me." His presence changed the dynamic of the channel entirely. Where Evelyn's early videos had been about individual defiance, these new ones became conversations about connection, healing, and the complex responsibilities of love. "My son has been sober for 8 months now," Evelyn said, looking at Tommy with visible pride. "Not because I stopped enabling him, but because he realized that proving himself to me was less important than proving himself to himself." "The hardest part about getting sober," Tommy added, "wasn't giving up alcohol. It was accepting that my problems weren't really about my problems. They were about my unwillingness to deal with my problems. My mom showed me that age doesn't excuse you from growth. If she could transform herself at 90, I could transform myself at 48. The comments section became a support group for families dealing with aging, addiction, grief, and the complicated mathematics of love. People shared stories of reconciliation and loss, of elderly relatives who surprised them with resilience, of their own fears about growing old in a society that discarded its seniors. Jessica's documentary premiered at the Dallas International Film Festival 6 months after Diana's death. Evelyn, now 94 and wearing a subtle silver tiara that had belonged to Diana, sat in the front row between Rosa and Tommy, watching her journey unfold on the big screen. The film was called The Last One Standing, and it traced 3 years of Evelyn's life, from the canceled birthday party through Diana's death and her current mission of helping families navigate aging with dignity. Jessica had woven together the YouTube videos, family interviews, and intimate moments of grief and growth into something that felt both specific and universal. When Marcus appeared on screen, footage from before his death, talking about his mother's internet phase with visible embarrassment, Evelyn felt a pang of loss mixed with forgiveness. He'd been struggling with his own demons, she realized, just like all of them. Diana's segments were the hardest to watch. There she was, thin from chemotherapy but glowing with newfound purpose, talking about the courage it takes to start over at any age. "My mother didn't teach me to be fearless," she said in one interview. "She taught me that fear is just information, not instruction." The audience gave the film a standing ovation. Afterward, during the Q&A, an elderly woman in the back raised her hand. "What would you say to someone who feels like they're already too old to change?" Evelyn stood, her 94-year-old body straight and strong. "I'd say that as long as you're breathing, you're not done writing your story. Age doesn't disqualify you from transformation. It just gives you more material to work with." The documentary won the Audience Choice Award and was picked up for national distribution. More importantly, it generated thousands of emails from families dealing with similar issues. Evelyn found herself inadvertently becoming an advocate for aging with dignity, invited to speak at conferences, and featured in articles about ageism and family dynamics. "I never intended to become an activist," she told a reporter from the Dallas Morning News. "I just wanted to prove I wasn't almost dead. But somewhere along the way, I realized that proving you're alive isn't enough. You have to use that life for something that matters." Her YouTube channel evolved again, becoming Almost Dead Anyway, a guide to living fully. She brought on guest experts, geriatricians, family therapists, other seniors who'd found purpose late in life. Rosa became an official co-host, sharing her own wisdom about friendship and faith. Tommy started a segment called The Recovering Child, where he talked to other adult children dealing with aging parents and family guilt. "We're not trying to give people false hope," Evelyn explained to her growing audience. "We're trying to give them better tools. Aging is inevitable, but ageism is a choice. Family dysfunction is common, but healing is possible, and finding purpose at any age isn't miraculous. It's just good planning." On her 94th birthday, exactly 4 years after the canceled party that started everything, Evelyn sat in her kitchen surrounded by flowers from viewers around the world. The celebration was small but meaningful. Rosa, Tommy, Jessica, Father Miguel, and Dr. Williams, plus dozens of virtual attendees joining the livestream. 4 years ago, my children canceled my birthday party because they thought I was almost dead anyway, she told the camera. Today, I'm celebrating not just another year of life, but 4 years of learning the difference between surviving and thriving. She looked around the table at the chosen family she'd built through loss and love. The secret isn't outliving other people. The secret is living so fully that when your time comes, you leave the world a little better than you found it. Tommy raised his coffee mug in a toast to Mom, who taught us that the best revenge is living well, and the best victory is helping others do the same. As they toasted her birthday, Evelyn realized she'd finally found what she'd been looking for when she made that dark vow 4 years ago. Not the hollow satisfaction of outliving her critics, but the deep fulfillment of using her time to help others live with dignity and purpose. She was still almost dead in the grand scheme of things, but she was also more alive than she'd ever been, and that, she'd learned, was the only victory that really mattered. On the morning of her 95th birthday, Evelyn Mae Rodriguez woke up to find her kitchen transformed into something she'd never imagined possible. Flowers covered every surface, not just the usual roses and carnations, but exotic blooms from viewers around the world. Orchids from Singapore, sunflowers from Kansas, wildflowers picked by grandchildren in Montana, and carefully pressed between book pages before being mailed to Dallas. The kitchen looked like a botanical garden had exploded with love. "Surprise!" Rosa called from the stove, where she was making what appeared to be enough coffee for a small army. Though I suppose it's not much of a surprise when people have been arriving since 6 this morning. Through the kitchen window, Evelyn could see her backyard filling with people. Not the 150 guests she'd originally planned for 5 years ago, but something better. A chosen family of supporters who'd found each other through her journey. Jessica was setting up camera equipment with the help of 2 film students from UNT. Dr. Williams had driven down from her practice to attend. Father Miguel was deep in conversation with a woman Evelyn recognized as Marie from Minnesota, whose emails about caring for her mother with Alzheimer's had become a recurring theme on the channel. "How many people are coming?" Evelyn asked, adjusting the pearl tiara that had become her signature, a gift from Diana's jewelry collection that Tommy had insisted she wear. "About 60, Tommy said, appearing in the doorway with his arms full of folding chairs. "Plus another 300 joining the live stream. I had to upgrade our internet package twice this week." At 49, Tommy looked like a different person than the broken man who'd been drinking himself to death in her garage apartment 5 years ago. Sobriety had returned color to his face and purpose to his movements. He'd started a nonprofit organization called Second Chances After 50, helping people navigate major life changes in their later decades. His own transformation had become a case study in the power of choosing growth over stagnation. 300. Evelyn felt a flutter of the old performance anxiety. "What if I don't have anything interesting to say?" "Mom," Tommy laughed, "you're 95 years old and you just got invited to speak at the White House Conference on Aging. I think you'll manage." The invitation had arrived 2 weeks ago, requesting that Evelyn participate in a panel discussion about combating ageism in American society. The letter, signed by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, had left her speechless for a full 5 minutes, a rare occurrence that Rosa had enjoyed immensely. "The woman who was almost dead anyway is now advising the federal government," Rosa had pointed out gleefully. "I'd say that's what they call poetic justice." The party officially began at 2 o'clock, but people had been filtering into the backyard all morning. Evelyn moved among them like a queen holding court, listening to stories and offering the kind of practical wisdom that had made her YouTube channel essential viewing for families dealing with aging issues. There was Margaret from Ohio, who'd driven 12 hours to thank Evelyn for the video about maintaining dignity in nursing homes. "My mother died last month," Margaret said, "but because of your advice, she spent her last year being treated like a person instead of a patient." There was David, not her former son-in-law, but a different David from Seattle, whose elderly father had started painting at 87 after watching one of Evelyn's videos about trying new things. He's having his first art show next month, David beamed. Says he's got 70 years of inspiration to catch up on. There was Carmen, a teenager from Dallas whose viral TikTok about her badass abuela had led her to discover Evelyn's channel. You made me realize my grandmother isn't just waiting to die, Carmen said. She's living, and I was missing it. Jessica captured it all. Her documentary skills now focused on preserving the community that had grown around Evelyn's story. The original film had won 3 more awards and sparked conversations about aging in dozens of countries. But more importantly, it had created connections between people who'd felt isolated in their experiences with family, loss, and the challenge of growing older in a youth-obsessed society. 5 years ago, you set out to prove you weren't almost dead, Jessica said during a brief interview for the live stream. Did you imagine it would lead to all this? Evelyn looked around the backyard filled with people of all ages, united by stories of resilience and transformation. Honestly, I thought I was just going to make my children feel guilty for canceling my party. I had no idea that pain could become purpose, or that sharing your struggles could help other people with theirs. What would you tell your younger self, the woman sitting in this kitchen 5 years ago, heartbroken and angry? I'd tell her that being dismissed by people who should love you isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of letting them define your worth. Evelyn paused, considering. And I'd tell her that the best revenge isn't outliving your enemies. It's outliving your old self and becoming someone who lifts others up instead of waiting for them to fall down. The speeches began as the sun started to set, casting golden light across the gathering. Tommy went first, his words carrying the weight of someone who'd learned to measure success in sobriety milestones and genuine connections, rather than failed businesses and empty bottles. 5 years ago, I was a 44-year-old man living in my mother's garage, contributing nothing to the world except disappointment, he began. I supported canceling her birthday party because I was ashamed of my own failures, and it was easier to dismiss her dreams than face my own broken ones. His voice grew stronger as he continued. But my mother taught me something important. It's never too late to become the person you're supposed to be. Not at 50, not at 70, not at 95. Age isn't a limitation, it's just more experience to work with. He looked directly at Evelyn, his eyes bright with tears he no longer felt ashamed to shed. Mom, you didn't just outlive Marcus and Deanna. You outlived the version of yourself that believed other people's opinions mattered more than your own truth. And in doing that, you saved me from outliving myself too. Rosa spoke next, her words carrying the authority of someone who'd witnessed every stage of Evelyn's transformation. I've known this woman for 47 years, she said, and I can tell you that the Evelyn Rodriguez you see today isn't new. This strength, this fire, this refusal to be invisible, it was always there. Life just tried to convince her to hide it. She turned to address the crowd. That's the real message of our story. Not that you can become someone different, but that you can stop pretending to be smaller than you actually are. Father Miguel offered a blessing that mixed theology with practical wisdom, as had become his trademark. God doesn't stop writing your story when you turn 60 or 70 or 90, he said. Every day you wake up is another blank page. What Evelyn has shown us is that you can write a beautiful ending even if the middle chapters were difficult. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Evelyn found herself sitting at her kitchen table with the core group that had become her chosen family. Rosa, Tommy, Jessica, Dr. Williams, Father Miguel, and a few others who'd made the journey from online supporters to genuine friends. So, Dr. Williams said, raising her coffee cup, what's next for the woman who was supposed to be almost dead 5 years ago? Evelyn laughed, the sound carrying more joy than it had in years. Well, there's the White House conference next month. And Tommy and I are working on a book about intergenerational healing. And Rosa has convinced me to start a podcast called Stubborn Old Women. Don't forget the documentary sequel, Jessica added. Netflix wants to follow up on how the community has grown. And I'm thinking about learning to surf, Evelyn said with a perfectly straight face. I figure if I'm going to keep proving I'm not dead, I might as well make it interesting. The laughter that followed was warm and genuine, the sound of people who'd found each other through pain and built something beautiful together. You know what I realized today? Evelyn said as the laughter died down. I spent 2 years trying to outlive my children to prove a point. But the real victory isn't in the outliving, it's in the living. Marcus and Diana are gone, but the love I had for them, the lessons they taught me, the ways they challenged me to grow, that's still here. That's what really outlives everything. She looked around the table at these people who'd become her family by choice rather than by blood. I may have outlasted my children, but they outlive me too. In every story I tell about them, every moment of wisdom I gained from loving them, every time I help another family avoid the mistakes we made. Tommy reached across the table to squeeze her hand. They'd be proud of who you've become, Mom. Both of them. They'd be proud of who you've become too, Mijo. And Diana would be thrilled that her dream of teaching finally came true, just not in the way she expected. As the evening ended and the last guest departed, Evelyn sat in her kitchen one more time, surrounded by the remnants of celebration. 5 years ago, she'd sat in this same spot, devastated by her family's betrayal, vowing to outlive them all out of spite and hurt. Now, at 95, she understood the difference between surviving and thriving, between outlasting and outliving, between proving a point and making a difference. She was still almost dead, in the grand scheme of things. Everyone was almost dead, really. It was just a matter of timing and luck and the choices they made along the way. But she was also more alive than she'd ever been, surrounded by love that transcended blood relations, using her time to help others live with dignity and purpose, proving every day that the best revenge was indeed living well. Her children had said she was almost dead anyway. They'd been wrong about the almost part, but they'd been right about one thing. Everybody was heading toward the same destination eventually. The only question was what you did with the journey. And Evelyn Mae Rodriguez, at 95 years old and still wearing her tiara, planned to make every remaining day count. After all, she wasn't almost dead. She was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,